Gaywyck by Vincent Verga. Publisher Allison Books, Los Angeles, New York. Narrator Eric Aust. I returned to my room to bathe before dinner. Evidently happy, I liberally sprinkled the bath powder to my delight. Suds rose above the rim like alpine peaks. Cale settled himself on the sink to observe, looking like a snowy owl. I immersed myself and was distracted by lost soap. When suddenly the lamp was extinguished. Before I could rise, two hands grabbed my head and pushed me under the water. I flailed and splashed, but my assailant's grip was so well judged that I was unable to right myself and was on the verge of blacking out. When I was released, sputtering and gasping for air, I climbed from the tub to the sounds of a demented Cale. His paws were blood-stained, and his fur was puffed up as it had been the first time I met Keys. His growls were deep-throated, and his tail flicked with rage. The cat had saved my life. Wet, bloody footprints ended halfway through my apartment. The game had gone too far. I would leave Gaywyck in the morning. Denvers and I dined together. We shared a piece of sirloin, some kale, and mashed potatoes. A very shanty Irish, this. The meal went well after a rocky start. A very angry Ambrose had questioned us about Brian. Has anyone seen Brian? I never see Brian, Denvers mused. Not even when he's directly in front of me. I glanced at him to see if he were joking. He decidedly was not, and I shook my head and asked how long he'd been missing. Since right after luncheon, Ambrose whined. He's gone off. Denver sniffed the sirloin nervously. What's gone off? That's odd, I said, unable not to say it. He hasn't done that for the longest while. Could your magic be losing its potency? Denvers asked with the tiniest half smile, twitching upward at the corners of his slack mouth. I filled mine with mashed potatoes to avoid risk. There was much wine to lighten the mood. Afterward, he invited me into the small study for a brandy. He stood under the Baroque mirror in front of a fire as he had my first night in the house. But his was the only face above me, a face pale and aged, ravaged by time, weary, loveless, and revealed. I thought of Mary Rose Gaylord, escaped from her locked chamber, peering through the window mirror at both of us. I made a mental note to ask Danough why such a mirror as this existed at Gaywyck. Pieces of a conversation describing the house as a stop on the Underground Railroad came into my head when Denver spoke. I'm tired, he said, desperately tired. Old age is hideous. Life is grotesque. I don't agree, I said firmly, holding steady as his eyebrows slowly lifted. After what you've discovered here? I think the only thing hideous and evil here has been excess. Thank you, Socrates. Are you immune to excess? Good intentions are my only protection, I said defensively. Wanting to flee, but mesmerized by curiosity, I felt beyond his reach, as though the glass of brandy in my hand was as potent as Dorothy Gale's pail of water. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, he grinned mockingly. I don't believe there is a hell. Love is hell. Only if we allow it to be. Thinking makes it so. You've learned your lessons well. You are the best of teachers. I don't live by what I teach. Several retorts, but no contradictions came to mind. I remained silent. The use of don't instead of can't made his position clear. I wanted to continue the conversation. Sudden exhaustion forced me to end it. He walked me to my rooms, pausing there a moment to whisper, We two alone have sung like birds. I the cage. Then turning, departed without a good night. I fell into bed, too spent to read, barely able to undress. I was sucked from my sleep by a voice sweetly chanting my name. Disoriented, slow to awaken, I was buoyed by warm currents. Yet there was a heaviness in my extremities, as though pulled by aqueous roots and tendrils. From the corner of Jones's mouth, a sea spider peeked. Lewd images torn from photographs aroused me. The cooing of my name consoled like stroking loving hands. I tumbled in a grindy way before touching earth. I opened my eyes. A noose of anxiety tightened around my throat. Devoid of peripheral vision, I peered into a funnel. At the open window, the woman from the Rossetti portrait glistered and billowed, beckoning me to follow. We met at a masquerade party and similar dreams, I thought, as she knows the way back. Her blue dress twisted, flame-like in the breeze. Around her, moonbeams refracted, momentarily blinding me. I moaned. Why had Danough lied? He had been in my bed. The eye of the camera saw us in my bed. Keys saw him leave. I closed my eyes and slept. Again, I was called, but this time less gently. Hands yanked the coverlet away. I sat up. The figure drifted from the room, gliding across the portico. Unwillingly, I followed. Awake, asleep, the two states coexisted. I walked in darkness, but for her luminous presence hung like the moon in my eyes. The night air chilled. On the lawn below, the coruscating figure fluttered toward the ocean. Unafraid, I descended, crossing the dew-soaked grass in pursuit. At the yews, I stopped. She had taken flight. High behind scudding clouds, she drifted. Robbie! Robbie! The wind raised and carried me down the slanting wooden steps to the sloping shore. On the soft sand, balance eluded me. I'm cold. Warmth this way. Through the lapping surf, we splashed toward the jetty. Where is Cale? I wondered. Why didn't he come to my room tonight? My rescuer. She hummed Albanini. Her extended arms moved in the air like butterfly nets. Where are we going? To peace and quiet, she sang. At the base of the jetty, confronted by that pile of rocks, strength deserted me. I was dizzy and numb. A sourness filled me. I'm going to throw up, I thought. I can't go any further. Just a little more. Come up to the moon with me, Robbie. I called for Danough. I wanted release from this dream. Come up to the moon with me, Robbie. I climbed the rocks. She was already poised at the far edge, gazing out to sea like a figure on the prow of a ship. I advanced. She was gone. The earth spun too quickly. The moon swirled and light sparked like spray from a wave. I stood at the edge, surveying the unsteady sea, expecting to sight her gliding over its surface. The rocks rose and fell with the pull of the tide. She called me from behind, swaying with the moon in my eyes. I pivoted. Tilting, she approached. Her outstretched arms were huge. I balanced on the edge, crumbling to my knees with fright. Closer she came, hands larger and larger. On my back, I felt spray from the impatient sea. This will be the end, I prayed, or must I fall and awaken screaming? Danough's voice bellowed my name. It was the last thing I remembered before surfacing in my bed 24 hours later. When I woke, my tongue was swollen. I could not speak, could barely swallow. There was a pain in my head above my eyes that banded my skull, making it difficult for me to move. My neck was stiff. My stomach clawed. My extended gut radiated soreness. A rigidity cemented my toes together and produced the sensation of adamantine fingers. But most horrifyingly, a spasm knotted the muscles of my left side, causing me to cry out in pain. Danough leaned over me, soft, murmuring, comforting words. He looked heavy with grief, oppressed by his dark secret attachment to me. Who called love a pleasing plague? I closed my eyes. When next I opened them, all my physical difficulties were present, but lessened. The only addition being a smarting in my lungs that hindered the free flow of breath. Jane Austen, I thought, without knowing the reason. The clock struck 3. From beneath the drawn drapes, a seam of yellow light lay along the floor, confirming my sense of unnatural dusk. Gimlet-eyed, I noted a fire, kale by my hip, and Danough Gaylord hunched in a chair near my hand's end. Psst was the only sound I was able to produce and project. Danough instantly leaned forward. "Don't try to speak," he whispered. "You must sleep. You're safe now." I nodded, suddenly feeling nauseous. From the movement, I wanted to tell him that before he could openly love me, he would have to clear the barriers from his heart. The old affections with their untoward grief needed his acceptance first. His acknowledgement. I wanted to tell him many things that seemed wonderfully clear to me. He leaned further and kissed me on the lips. I sighed, content. He kissed me again. My heart revived. Raising my hand, I touched his unshaven cheek. Had anyone else ever felt the coarse stubble? "I love you," he said. I ventured another nod, swaying internally as though swinging in a hammock. "Go to sleep, Robert, please." I frowned. Go to sleep? I was thirsty. I needed to use the bathroom. I felt gummy and uncomfortable, and I smelled foul. Only in novels can people sleep for days, ignoring all bodily functions. I was annoyed someone had not considered this. I grunted instructions. I was in a very bad temper, bitterly aggrieved by my inability to ask pertinent questions, and by no one offering explanations. Safe was I? Safe from what? Safe from whom? Brian was called. A chamber pot located, water heated, and soup administered. I was not a good patient. I whimpered a great deal. I had difficulty swallowing the soup. I began to sob, which brought on another spasm in my left side, which instigated my pushing Danough away. His surprise and hurt mortified me. I felt wretched. I fell asleep. I awoke, feeling sanguine. There was a nub of stiffness in my back and thighs, but the debilitation was gone. Brian slept soundly in the chair by my side. Cale was away. It was night. Slipping from the bed, I walked quietly to the bathroom. I was wearing a mint green flannel nightshirt. A fire burned, although the windows were open and a warm breeze fluttering the drapes. The clock read midnight. I was nearly back in bed before noticing a form standing motionless in the shadows. Wrapped in a full black cape, his hair dripping from the seam, my lover beckoned. "You've been swimming," I whispered, not wishing to awaken Brian. "Yes. How do you feel?" "Fine. I'm well. What happened to me?" He motioned for us to go outside. "What happened?" I repeated on the portico, leaning against him. "Keys tried to kill you." My jaw dropped in disbelief. "He dressed in the Rossetti costume of my mother's fancy ball and took you to the sea. He drugged you first. He's been drugging you for months. The bedlam's dead. He's hanged himself." I felt sick. I did not want to believe him. Questions arose, causing greater pain in my mind than had recently been in my head. He's dead. Murder me? Was he the mysterious image in my photograph? How had he drugged me? How was Danough there to save me? "Come walk with me, Robbie. The balmy air will do you good." Opening the cloak, he revealed himself naked beneath. I pulled off my nightshirt and stepped beneath the circle of his arms. His warmth and musky scent quickened my senses. With our arms around each other, we walked down to the sunken garden and along the narrow path that linked it to the sea. There was a summer stillness and a cloudless, star-bright sky. The tide was out. The black jetty looked like a beached whale on the vast sand reef formed by the storm. separate lakes shimmered where the shallows should have been. I felt disoriented. He dropped the cape. Taking my hand, he led me. We walked and waded out to the skipping, foaming, distant surf. Somewhere a Bob White trilled. One moment, the water swirled at my ankles. The next, around my chest. The bottom had dropped from under my feet, sank into soft sand. With a hefty stroke, I was out of my depth, but calmly swimming beside him. He surged ahead, his muscular arms pulling him effortlessly through the water. I was able, without strain, to keep within calling distance. The absence of tension or fear gave me greater energy and speed. Stretching every muscle, I darted, passing him with a shout. "Turn left, then straight to Galway Bay." He caught my leg and gently pulled me to him. With short, thrashing movements, he drove his body beneath mine, making himself an island of warm flesh on which I could shelter. I reversed my position to kiss him on the mouth. When I glanced over his bobbing head toward Gaywyck, I was astonished by our feet. We had swum a tremendous distance. "You're a man one can lean on," I said, laughing at my silliness. I reversed my position, again to continue our swim, but from under the tender waves, his body's wonders distracted me. Perched on him, I managed to delight and be delighted. "I love you," I shouted gleefully, thrashing and flailing, repeating it, howling at the stars. I rolled overboard, surfaced, and climbed on top of him, planning to kiss his eyes, his ears, his neck, but was halted by the sound of sobs. "I nearly lost you," he explained hoarsely, withdrawing into grief. "It will happen soon now, and I cannot bear it." "I'll never leave you, Danough. You must know that." He reached as if I had stabbed him, wrenching his body in pain. Suddenly I wished us alone in the world, shipwrecked in sight of Elysium. He had begun to shiver, less from chill than from profound distress. "Make for shore, Captain Gaylord," I ordered, adding in an attempt to distract him from this sorrow I thought familiar. "What country friend is this?" I answered myself, abstracted, eager to be landed. "This is Illyria, lady," he whispered, his deep, mellow voice caressing the verse. "And what should I do in Illyria?" "My brother, he is in Elysium." "Perchance he is not drowned," I continued. "What think you, sailors?" Encircling me tightly with his arms, he began kicking his feet, propelling us toward shore. I could feel his heart pounding. I spoke the next line, wondering how much of the text I remembered. "It is perchance that you yourself were saved," he continued, hoarse again, overwhelmed by his sorrow. I could feel the words vibrating in his chest, echoing in mine. "Oh, my poor brother, and so perchance may he be." Enraged, he shouted his own name, and without breaking the rhythm of his movements, rolled over, submerging me. For a moment I thought him playful. I thought his mood had shifted by some personal release, and he wished me to turn or dive as one with him. Wrapping my arms with legs around, I squeezed tenaciously, determined not to express fear, attempting with that fierce gesture to express a willingness to die with him, if that was what he required. In spite of my resolve, when I could no longer breathe and he showed no sign of reversing our position, I panicked. Releasing my right arm from his back, I pulled it under the surface, thrusting my fingers between his legs to gently seize him. I exerted no pressure, merely asserted a claim to my life and his love. He reversed our positions. Shuddering, I sucked at the air, filling my lungs. I remembered the bath. Was it he then? Reaching shore, he scooped me into his arms, like a piece of flotsam, and crashed through the rolling surf. He held me so tightly that my chest and thighs burned. I tried to lower myself, but he would not release me. I laughed nervously, but was silenced by the rage I saw in his eyes. Wrapping my arms around his neck, I rested my head on his broad, tight shoulder and struggled to keep from weeping. He was causing me physical pain. I could not comprehend anything beyond that. I tried to deny it. He doesn't understand yet. When I shifted my position, attempting to wriggle free, he clamped his hand, squeezing me practically senseless. I shouted, stupefied, then begged him not to hurt me anymore. I was crying, trembling with terror. Jones. I thought of poor Jones as he stalked toward the shore. Danough, I whimpered. Danough, I'm afraid. He threw me down to the wet sand. When I tried to rise, he kicked me and straddled me, emanating fury and muttering brutal, vicious oaths. Pressing his fist to his eyes, he wailed and howled dementedly. I knew he wished me dead. I crawled, blindly vanquished by horror, like an osprey swooping on its prey. He lunged, his body ground my stomach and chest into the cutting sand. I pleaded with him not to kill me. He cuffed me on the left side of my head. The earth tilted. Waves cold as death's tongue licked around us as he savagely forced my legs apart, lacerating my thighs and knees on the sharp pebbles and shells. I punched at him. He pounded my head into the wet sand. I screamed, outraged by the pain, damning him while he tore his way to plunging, growling spasm, releasing a hot wrath beyond my keen, beyond all relation to myself. Pulling himself free, he stumbled away. I lay unmoving until he was gone. Then slowly I rolled over. The summer stillness and the cloudless, star-bright sky were as they were. Yet everything was different. I was alive, choking with tears and mucus. I stood and walked back into the sea. I was alive. I never wanted to die. It would happen soon enough. It needed no assistance for me or anyone else. I would die for no one, not even for myself, in the name of love. I swam until I had no strength, and I drifted with the current. The salt water scalded my wounds, but it cleansed and embraced me, covering me and my shame. What had I done wrong? Why did I not fought harder? I was no longer a tiny child. Why had I behaved as one? And I kept responding with a question. How could he hurt me? Exhausted, I made for land. I walked. I wandered up the beach with no known destination, oblivious of reason. I could not comprehend why he would hurt me. If he loved me in deep melancholia, I strayed among the dunes. I have no idea how I reached Nanny Wells. There is too much I don't understand, Nanny. In time you will see, she soothed, tucking me into a bed. When? I begged, convinced I would never see. When you are ready, child. Tell me! I cannot. How do you know I will see? We all do, eventually, and occasionally before it's too late. I don't understand love. We never question love until it brings us pain. Shouldn't I ask questions? In matters of the heart, only those with answers, child. He hurt me. I know. He told me. He told me everything. Did you do nothing to him? Did you not hurt him? No! I would never hurt him, and if I did, I never meant it. He should know that. He should never have hurt me. Why did he hurt me? You're right. He should never have hurt you. He never means to hurt anyone. He was afraid. She trailed off and bid me sleep. Sleep? Who can sleep? I thought before sleeping. The afternoon was warm and hazy. A churning, sandy sea brought up its secrets and deposited them along the shore. A block of cloud covered the sun, turning the sky milky white as I walked in the surf back to Gaywyck, wearing a caftan Nanny Wells had given me. I thought of Danough Gaylord and knew some immense change had occurred within me. His act of violence had transformed me as radically as the storm had altered Gaywyck's terrains. I felt detached. Oh, we never question love until it brings us pain. I walked slowly, in no hurry. He did it from his pain. He can't accept our love. He didn't mean to hurt me. He's afraid of love. And what about me? I recalled his body weighing me down and the various terrors. My body tensed. I stopped walking and looked out to the horizon. Only fools and madmen and late 19th century romantics die for love, equating love with death and pain. It will not do. It's easier to die for love than live with it or without it. Men have died and worms have eaten them, but not for love. On the shore, in the far distance, a male figure paced at the foot of the jetty. I am certain a faculty develops in human beings, enabling us to recognize our loved ones, no matter the distance, no matter the crowd. Danough Gaylord waited for me. Nanny must have sent him a message. I walked up over the dune and sat in the upper branches of a toppled tree. I wondered if we could save the tree by pressing it back into the earth. Could the roots be returned to their original canals, restored like a great tooth to its socket? It would be the same, but mightn't it healthily live on? He's ashamed of our love. He wanted to kill it. And what about me? Scrambling from the maze of the dying tree, trying to avoid making metaphors, I walked further from the water, into the meadow. From the beginning he had fought against loving, like a perverse alchemist, turning gold to lead. I sighed with grief. I could not fathom it, of his hurting me. It had been possible to conceive, yet it had been done. He had done it. I could do nothing about it now. I could only make certain it never happened again. I would leave Gaywyck. Distracted by a bee climbing in Jacob's ladder, I set to get a closer look. I knew its instincts had led it to that purple flower, as surely as mine had led me to Danough Gaylord. When we collided in the hammock, he and I, it was right, and it was good. I knew in the circle of our loving that my life was unfolding according to its own correct sequence of discoveries. To be held by him was, for me, sublime comfort. It was my truth. In that embrace I had welcomed my eternity, and everything else had dissolved, become inconsequential, incidental, one with my need for him. I had wanted him, and I had needed him to eradicate me. And what about me? I no longer wanted to die in any way. I wanted no part of a love that required such grand sacrifice. And he wanted no part of a love like ours. My love could not change him, could not make it right and good for him. Love cannot do anything. The sage says it exists like the stars and the earth and the sea. It exists to be experienced and enjoyed. I did not want his pain, yet he seemed unable to love me, unless I accepted it. Contrary to his own instructions, he wanted me to love him because of, and in spite of it, I would leave Gaywyck. Certain he was grieving for what he had done, I rose and walked to the jetty. And what about me? I loved him. I don't want to leave him. There must be an explanation for what he did and why he did it. How will I know unless I ask him? I can't read his mind. I'll talk with him. I love him. Perhaps. I must trust myself to do what's right. I must trust him. I'm no longer a child. I can take care of myself. I've changed. Can't he change? Can't he learn? I love him. I know he loves me. There must be a chance if we love one another. I love him. I love him. We can change. We can. He stood with his back to me, watching the sea, waiting. He wore a collarless white linen shirt and gray trousers, rolled up over his slim, bare ankles. Quietly, I cleared the wood. He turned, sensing my approach. I remembered the first time I had seen him, like then. His beauty dazzled. He smiled and moved toward me. The clouds parted, covering us with warm, golden sunlight. I stopped, stunned by what I saw, and knew instantly to be true. He took me in his arms. I hung against him, unable to speak. How could I have ever mistaken the other for him? Cormac will never hurt you again, he whispered. Suddenly I grasped what Nanny Wells had meant by seeing. Having seen myself, I was finally able to see others. The blind could see, and it had not been too late. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.